there's a problem with men, and I don't know what's going on, but it's something that's been seen like the last 20 years or so. There's a big problem with men, and it seems to not affect men like Clayton, but as soon as like you get to that age where you get married, but it's not even marriage that causes the problem. It's when children enter the world, and I don't know, it's so strange, but men, dads, I guess it's dads, because I guess not all men, they are idiots. They are so stupid. I mean, the things that they say and do, moronic. And what's the cure? Don't get married, don't have kids. And of course, I'm being silly, but I know you've noticed it, and maybe I haven't noticed it as much anymore, but it's probably because we get TV now through like streaming, and the ads are different, or maybe there's no ads at all. But and I think the church has dealt with this in probably 10 years ago, but the men bashing, right? Especially fathers, right? In all, not all, but in so many TV commercials, in so many sitcoms, dads are so stupid. They're the most idiotic people on the planet. And if aliens were real, and they're not, and if they were real and they were, getting their source from sitcoms, from TV, from commercials, they would conclude that once a man has children, they are the dumbest people on the planet. Now, it's true that people like myself don't help ourselves as often. We maybe act the fool. We pride ourselves in ridiculous dad jokes, which aren't really funny, but we think they are. So, we sort of help the problem along, maybe some of us from time to time, but there is this thing in culture that I just am so against, right? It's disrespectful, it's ridiculous, and it's not true, and it devalues men, and it devalues fatherhood. I didn't want to bring a Father's Day sermon, and really I don't ever want to, but I'll probably run out of material and have to, where we are always praising the moms on Mother's Day and telling the dads that they're terrible and need to do better, right? I don't want to be a part of that, but I think the material I have, guess what is mostly written about fatherhood in here? That we need to give instruction and discipline. I mean, that is the biblical standard. That we are those who instruct and discipline in the family. That is a major, major role as a father, okay? But we can celebrate that. We can carry that as a responsibility that was given to us from God, and that it's a privilege, and we can look at that positively. And so there probably will be a Father's Day lesson, or maybe just a lesson on fathers that's not on Father's Day, where I do preach and say, hey, let's maybe, if we're struggling, if we are lacking, we do need to do better. But I just don't like that trend in church where Father's Day lessons are sort of, you got to do better. And so what I want to say is that, yeah, something needs to be better. And maybe it's wives when they get together, or maybe it's women when they're at work surrounded with other women. Maybe it's that they need to stop talking poorly about their husbands together. Have you witnessed that? Have you been around that? It's sort of, taking a stereotype of women, right? Because gossip, very stereotypical, and this isn't indicative of anyone that I know. But the gossiping housewives. I mean, that's sort of a phrase, right? That doesn't lump all women together. That doesn't lump all of you together into that. But maybe, right? Perhaps there is some element to that needs to be looked at in your life. I worked at an elementary school, and nowadays, more and more men are teaching, and more men are teaching younger, which I think is cool. But I worked with a lot of women, and it wasn't all the time, but I do remember there being instances where I would tell women, my colleagues, that they need to speak well of their husbands to other people. If you've got issues, then solve those issues in the family, right? But I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be a part of it, really, right? And so I would just kindly rebuff the conversation. And so if we can see and identify that in TV commercials and in sitcoms and on social media, dads are the stupidest things on this planet, and we laugh at that, yeah, I get it, right? Like, lighten up, Clayton, it's just a joke. I get that, and I do probably laugh at some of those things. But when it's systemic, when it's culture-wide, and when it's like it does start to affect men. And there is a problem in masculinity today. There's a problem in men's health today. And so, words have power. Remember the Proverbs that there's the power of life and death is in the tongue. And so I want us to be reminded of that. You're not going to be learning anything today that's amazing and new. Today we're just reminding and we're holding up, and I wanted to showcase some things that I admire about some of the dads found in the Bible. But I just wanted to start by really just saying, listen, let's do what we can to not continue that attitude and that mindset. So, guys, let's speak well of other men and of other husbands. I have been personally uplifted by my brethren in this congregation. I've had brothers come up to me and put their arm around me and say, Clayton, I love you. You're doing a great job, right? Basically, they are affirming me. And I think we need to make that more normal. I think that could be something that men, maybe in generations past, it just wasn't a part of culture. I think it's becoming more accepted. And I also think it's maybe more needed today because of the direction of men's health. That guys need to tell other guys that they're doing a good job, that they are a good dad. That, I love watching you be a father to your kids because you're amazing. I mean, guys need to hear that. We need to build each other up and affirm each other and speak blessing, speak life into one another. And so women, right, when you're with other women, speak positively of the father of your children and try to work against the cultural direction, all right? Man bashing must stop. All right, well, I wanted to share with you a few things that I admire about some of the men in the Bible. Unfortunately, I think we have more poor examples in the scriptures of fathers than we have of good examples. Or maybe that's not true. Maybe it's just we don't have a lot said about it. Because I wonder about guys like Jethro, Zipporah's father. He was wise. He was a wise man. And I admire the wisdom of that man. And there used to be TV shows back when TV was actually worth watching. There was a sitcom called, I don't know if it was called a sitcom, sorry. It was a show called Father Knows Best. And it highlighted the wisdom of the father of the family. And I think that actually is probably more accurate of what men aspire to be like and try to be. Not that they have every answer and every solution to every problem, but men are not idiots, fathers are not complete imbeciles. And there's wisdom there, and ultimately, if a man is a man of God and he's growing and learning from the wisdom of God in the Bible, he's going to have a pretty good head on his shoulders, and he's going to be to advise in his family in pretty wise, godly ways. But I admire the wisdom of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. You might remember when he gave Moses the advice that you need to delegate, bro. You're taking on so much. You need to get some of that off your plate and appoint other men to be judges of lesser things and bring the really difficult things, the things that they can't solve, to you. And that was an incredibly amazing and wise thing. And I just wonder what else this man Jethro was able to figure out with wisdom. So I admire that about Jethro. But let me go back to the beginning, to Adam. There's a lot to admire about Adam. Now, I know that sometimes preachers call him a coward because he didn't protect his wife in the garden. I can't go that far. Scripture doesn't say that, and I just have a problem calling Adam a coward because he was there with his wife and didn't protect her from the serpent. Instead, I think about, I admire that guy because he was the very first doula. He was the very first birthing partner. Holy moly, can you imagine being Adam when the first son was born? No precedent, no experience, nobody to hold his hand and to tell him what to expect. I never thought about that before until I was working on this lesson, thinking like, what's admirable about Adam as a dad? Other than being able to truly wear a badge that says world's best dad for a short amount of time, right? I just imagine thinking about that, the courage, sort of raising children without having books to read and without having the wisdom of mom and dad. Now, I sort of trust that God helped him out. The scriptures doesn't say that, but I sort of think that between Adam's wisdom in seeing and taking care of all the animals, seeing how that process worked, I think God helped ensure things like that would be okay. But he was the world's number one dad for a short period of time. About Job, let's get some scripture. I wanted to remind you of this. I know we've read this recently, and in case you're visiting or maybe you're newer here, we do try to read through a book of the Bible together. So that's why we're reading Ecclesiastes, a whole chapter. We read a chapter of the Bible each time. But in Job chapter 1, let's just read this, and I want to share with you what I admire about Job as a dad. It says, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. So he, as a man, he was a man of God. And so that's admirable. But how was he as a father? Well, if we keep reading, it says 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And that man was the greatest of all the men of the East. So not only is he a man of God, but he's also very wealthy, and yet he's still godly. So he is a good steward. Verse 4 says, his sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day. And they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of feasting had completed their cycle, Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. And so you have this idea of Job praying for and administering an offering on their behalf. So immediately right here about Job, we see he's a man of God, but we also see that what's admirable about him as a father is he has the spiritual condition of his children seemingly at the forefront of his mind, praying for them, and thinking like maybe they sinned in this feasting, and so I'm gonna consecrate them. And remember, consecrate means to dedicate, to set apart. It's similar in word construction to words like dedication, consecration, even sanctification. Sorry, those 3 words are very related in meaning. And so he's trying to make sure that they too are blameless before God by offering these sacrifices. And I think that is so admirable and so necessary and needed for fathers today. So, if we're looking to Adam, well, we admire his strength, his boldness, the fact that he could do that. I admire that about Adam, that he had to deal with that and seemingly was successful. We admire about Job that he is praying for and concerned for the spiritual upbringing of his children. And I would say that's going to be just so crucial and so important for fathers today. And then what about Noah? We talk about our culture, our society, that raising children in America today, knowing that, our culture wants our kids, that they want our kids' hearts. They don't want our kids to grow up believing as we do and practicing as we do, that there's this war on our children and that we need to be raising our children in the battle. Like, realize there's this war for your children that's happening, first of all, and then also realize that we need to be proactive and feeding them and equipping them to deal with the world that they're being brought up in. And so there's a lot of righteous people here, though, compared to Noah's day, where we're told where Noah and his world, Noah was blessed by God because apparently Noah was doing the right things. He was righteous. He had a relationship with God. And Noah somehow got all three of his sons on the boat and their wives. And I admire Noah for that. In a world that it was so evil and so wicked that God wanted to destroy every human life on earth, I admire Noah for raising three men to trust God or to trust him enough. I mean, we could just admire Noah if all that was true was that his three boys trusted their daddy. But I suspect that they had their own faith in God. And if they didn't before the rain came, I believe that they developed a trust and a faith and a belief in God when God saved them through the ark. So think about that we raise our children today in a toxic culture, one that's very much against Christianity, but admire Noah and the father that he was to those three boys to get them to follow him and to be on the boat when the day came. Hezekiah is someone else I thought about, and I admire Hezekiah because he was a man of great faith. He's one of the best stories for restoration in the kingdom, in the southern kingdom, of getting the people to start observing the laws again and to clean up the temple. And he came from, what was his lineage, his heritage? Well, he came from Ahaz as his father, and sort of Ahaz, he has that nickname, Faithless Ahaz. Not trusting God. Hezekiah was his son, and yet Hezekiah came out and made his own life, made his own choices, and he chose to follow God. Now, I guess a sad part about Hezekiah is that his own son, Manasseh, was one of the most evil kings, and one of the most evil kings of Judah. And so, I mean, there are lessons there for us, but I admire Hezekiah choosing to follow God despite the failings of his own father. Who else do I want to maybe bring out? Zebedee. I wish we knew more about Zebedee, the father of James and John. I really wish we could know more about that man. But what do we know? That he raised two hard-working boys. He raised two hard-working boys who faithfully served with their father and help them. And when we first see them, they're in the boat with their daddy, working the family business of being a fisherman, mending the nets. And when Jesus calls them, they immediately leave their father. Now, was Zebedee proud of his sons for being a disciple of Jesus? I don't know what he immediately felt. I sort of feel like he might have felt abandoned, but we don't know. So it was just as irrational to think, oh, he was so proud of his boys, than it is to think that he was full of resentment. I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us, so let's not make guesses on either side. But what we know and what I admire about Zebedee is he raised two hard-working boys who would later be trained by Jesus and become two very influential, well, I would say especially one very influential. James, unfortunately, was the first apostle to be killed. But think about that in today's context of raising children today. And it's almost like that's the goal now. Can I please just raise children that are hard workers, that will do something honorable, and that will pull their own weight in life? I mean, think about, isn't that how society is sort of moaning and complaining about the workforce right now and the youth that are entering the workforce? Can't we just find people who will work for an honest day, for honest pay? So I admire Zebedee for how he raised his boys, and I hope he was proud of his sons. Oh, Abraham. I realize this about Abraham. Abraham is the best dad in all of the Bible, because think about it. After a really long hike with his son, he actually didn't want to kill him. All right. So I actually have had very good experiences with my children and my boys on hikes in the mountains, but you know how sometimes it goes. Now, Abraham, I admire him so much, and we all do, and of course so much of the scripture points back to Abraham being that man of faith. And I think we have to insert the word trust. and really think about his trust in God. I admire Abraham because of his commitment to God. Remember that the Hebrews text tells us, the Hebrew letter in the New Testament tells us that Abraham just believed that God would raise him from the dead. Not having been told that, not having had any precedent for anybody rising from the dead, Abraham just believed that. Because he has this promise from God that boy Isaac is the boy of promise. I want to make a great nation from him, but now you're telling me to go and sacrifice him. So I admire Abraham because as much as he loved that boy Isaac, and we can't appreciate how much he would have doted on Isaac, being a man of advanced age, being a man whose wife was barren, and having given up, maybe even in their prayers, asking God for a child because they just realized that, well, it's not for us, it's not in the plan. And then to finally then miraculously have, I'm saying miraculous because she's barren and God blessed Sarah to have Isaac. I do believe it was God intervening, so I guess it's okay to say miraculous. Not like Jesus' birth, of course, but he finally has this son. Can you imagine the emotions as he's contemplating sacrificing his son? And so I admire Abraham for having to deal with the emotions on that day. I've never been asked to consider that. And although we watch movies and we have experiences in life that sort of throw us into emotional situations and cause us to feel things emotionally, I admire Abraham because God asked him to feel some things that day that would have been absolutely terrible to feel. As silly as this sounds, I've had instances where we've had to like put dogs down, and I couldn't afford or maybe didn't want to pay what it would cost to humanely do that. And so it's crossed my mind, I have other ways that I could put my dog down that would cost about 19 cents. But my heart hurts in that because it's not humane. It's not as humane as it could be. What would be the most humane way for Abraham to sacrifice his son? He had to think about those things on that day. And so I admire Abraham for his commitment to God, for his trust in God, and I admire Abraham for being the only unique person to have been asked by God to experience the emotions and the thoughts that he had to experience and process that day. I admire Joseph, the father of Jesus, because of the strength that he had in his mind, the resolution of his will, that once the angel spoke to him, he said, okay, this is the way it is, and this is how I'm going to live, and this is how I'm going to treat my betrothed, and I'm going to be the leader of this family. And I admire Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, for how he, once he had his mind made up, he stuck and was strong in exercising the decision that the angel helped him see he had to make. We can admire Jesse, David's father, for raising 8 sons, and the oldest 3 served in the army. I mean, there's something to be said about a man who raises 8 boys. Nothing is said if he had daughters. But you see, fathers are not stupid. Fathers are not imbeciles. And to sort of take a name in the Bible where you have a sentence about them and then to imagine them as a father based on the very little we know, it's an interesting exercise. And it leaves you wanting more information. Simon of Cyrene. Now, this is a little bit of conjecture. This is my opinion. Okay, I can't prove this from the scripture. But listen carefully. Simon of Cyrene, the one who was pressed into service to help carry the cross of Christ, we're told that he had 2 sons, Alexander and Rufus. And later on, in the closing of the Roman letter, Paul says to greet Rufus and his mother. And Paul makes a comment about her being also his mother. So whoever this Rufus was, and by the way, church tradition, and the only other Rufus you have, is you see that could this be Simon of Cyrene's son, who now becomes a Christian and is mentioned by Paul in the greetings at the end of Romans. I think that's amazing. And what does that then say about Simon of Cyrene being a father? Someone who was clearly impacted on the day of Golgotha. And then like the song about the lamb of that day. I don't know if you've, I'm sorry, ask me later for the name of that song that's sung. But when he says, watch the lamb, when his kids, it's a poetic song about Simon on that day, bringing the lamb with his kids into the town. The kids lose the lamb, and he says, you know, look at the lamb. And he's pointing to Jesus up on the cross. It's a beautiful song. I'm sorry I don't know the title of it at the moment, but what kind of father must he have been to have influenced his children? And again, it's my opinion that the Rufus in Romans 16, verse 13, is the son of Simon of Cyrene. And so I admire Simon for those things. And then I'm just so curious. What about Elijah and Elisha? Were they good daddies? What about Asa and Jehoshaphat? They were both good kings in the kingdom of Judah, but were they good dads? Was Moses a good dad? Was Aaron? You know, I've also thought about this, and I want you to consider it. That what makes a dad a good dad could be different. Could mean different things to different cultures and different periods of time throughout human history. Maybe there was a period of time that what made dad a really good dad was that he provided for his family to eat, and that they had built a shelter for them, and that he slept by the door and kept them safe. Maybe he didn't have time to play with his kids. Maybe he didn't have time to teach them about baseball, to play catch with them in the backyard, and to teach them to blow snot bubbles when you're on the offensive line trying to block the defensive guy across from you. But maybe that's what made a dad a really good dad in times before. And we're blessed with having a life of ease, and that provides us with time. And so now, good dads are those who not only provide for and protect, but also love, and those who speak life into their children, to affirm their children. It's so important to listen and to encourage, to be proud of the children, to pray for them, to spend time together, but to speak life into them, to build them up by telling them that you love them and that they are such a good person, that their hearts are pure, and that you see for them such a future if they continue growing in their knowledge of God and their service of Him, and they keep growing in their honorable character. You know, dads are never going to ever regret sacrificing for their families and giving time and teaching and studying and expressing their feelings for their children. One question I'd like to ask you, and please talk to me about it because I'm still wanting to learn and grow as a father. What is the most important quality that makes a dad great? And maybe you struggle like me to come up with a top one, but could we discuss maybe a list of things that should be included? I would love to keep learning from you. There are admirable fathers among us in our small church family. And that's one of the blessings of the church, and we prayed for that this morning during our Bible class hour. We thanked God for the father-like figures that we receive in the church. That it's possible that there may be some here today, or certainly people that you know that didn't have a good earthly father, but that we have a heavenly Father who loves and cares for us, and He has provided us multiple fathers in the church that we can look up to and learn from. I love this saying. It's from a man named John Warrens. He's a brother and a friend. And he often writes on social media about being the best dad to the best kids. And he has one who has, for years, advocated that you are the best dad to the best kids. And he provides encouragement and love and positivity into fatherhood. And I love his messages. And so I want to leave you with that, to keep being the best dad to the best kids. Brethren, if someone is struggling spiritually with any matter, if you would like the help of this congregation, if there's something we can do for you, if you're in need, even for things physically in this life, the invitation is open in a public way, but remember that you can come and speak to any of us here at the family at any time. The invitation, in a sense, is always open, to where if you need the help of your Christian family, please don't wait and go it alone. If there are any needs today, please consider making them known. Would you be standing as Ryan leads us in this song of invitation and encouragement?